Thank you so much, Helen, and it's a real pleasure to be moderating today's presentation. I'm a bit of an enthusiast of all things Mingei, and I had the pleasure of meeting both Jeffrey Montgomery and Luigi Zeni back in 2019 when the Montgomery Collection was on view at the Museo Vincenzo Vella in Livorno, Switzerland. And there was also a scholarly symposium called Reconsidering Mingei in October of that year that I had the pleasure of attending. So let me first tell you a little bit about Jeffrey Montgomery. He currently lives in Lugano, Switzerland, and has been collecting Japanese folk art for 50, maybe 60 years at this point. He regards himself as more of a keeper rather than a collector. There are two elements of Japanese culture and its objects that especially attract him: the strong ties with nature and the subtle implication of the transience of the world. When acquiring pieces, he depends strongly on his intuition and personal taste. He feels a connection with works by Kawai, Hamada, Leach, Murata, and other Mingei members, which is why he owns multiple stunning pieces from these major Mingei movement artists. Luigi Paolo Zeni obtained his MA degree in Japanese Studies and East Asian Art History from the University of Zurich. In 2022-2023, he worked as guest curator for the exhibition Japan, Form and Function, the Montgomery Collection, which is now at the Crow Museum in Dallas. Zeni's main fields of interest are Japanese ceramics and the contemporary scene of Japanese craftsmanship. He is presented at international conferences such as the 12th International Workshop at Kansai University and the Rethinking Mingei Symposium that took place in Livorno that I mentioned a little earlier. Zeni is currently assisting on a research project at Zurich's Reichberg Museum on Edo period Japanese printed books. He's also the chief editor of Wasoi, an interdisciplinary magazine on Japan founded in 2020. Now, the way we're going to move forward is that Luigi will do a presentation about the Mingei collection that's currently on view at the Crow and Mingei in general. Then I'll have a conversation with Jeffrey and Luigi, and then we'll open things up to our audience for questions. So with that, let me turn things over to Luigi, and I'll be back a little later.
Thank you, David, and thank you to the JASA board directors for organizing this webinar. And thank you to everyone for being here today to listen to our conversation about the Montgomery Collection and the exhibition on show at the Crow Museum of Asian Art in Dallas. I would like to start with a short presentation to become familiar with today's main topics. I will first introduce you to the concept of the exhibition and present the Montgomery Collection. I will then talk about an important historical event related to Japanese folk art, namely the Mingei movement of the 1920s. Finally, I will briefly delve into a few possible paths to visit this exhibition. Beginning on April 15th, 2023 through April 14th, 2024, the Crow Museum of Asian Art of the University of Texas at Dallas presents a landmark exhibition with the title Japan, Form and Function, the Montgomery Collection. It is the first time that the museum dedicates the entire institution to one sole presentation over such an extended period of time. The exhibition comprises more than 240 works spread throughout the galleries. It has been a real challenge to decide what would be the main theme of this exhibition. In fact, the Montgomery Collection is an encyclopedic compilation of artworks spanning 5,000 years of Japanese history. It covers the geography of the whole country, from the very south in Okinawa to the very north in Hokkaido. The collection includes all kinds of materials: ceramics, wood, metal, paper, textile, lacquer, glaze, paint, ink, and much more. Here are 4 examples from the Crow Museum exhibition, which I will describe from left to right. A stoneware sake bottle from the Shodai kiln in Kyushu, a red lacquered round tray with design of a stylized pine tree, a tea kettle with haystone pattern in cast and patinated iron, and finally a recumbent ox sculpture in painted cypress wood. The Montgomery Collection is a unique group of more than 1,100 objects that represent the indigenous handmade production of local weavers, ceramists, metal makers, wood makers, and lacquer manufacturers from the whole country. Here are 3 more examples. A square hand warmer with straw handles motif made at the Seto kiln in Aichi Prefecture. It is a glazed stoneware with stripes of alternating cobalt blue and iron oxide brown. Then we have a large lacquered tray from the 18th century, which looks extremely modern and could be exchanged for a contemporary piece of design. And finally, a mask of a kitchen guardian deity in carved and stained wood from the Tohoku region. These artworks are soaked with symbols, patterns, inscriptions derived from the site of production. They testify to the understated aesthetics of their maker, who is often anonymous. They manifest the needs of a certain community. They are the bearers of the country's history, a history rich in cross-cultural influences that have existed in East Asia for centuries between countries such as Japan, China, and Korea. In this exhibition, there are many examples of local Japanese artists and craftspeople who were able to incorporate techniques and patterns from neighboring countries into their works with sublime mastery. These are only some of the reasons that the Montgomery Collection has been considered by scholars and curators the most important collection of Japanese folk art outside Japan. The collection has been exhibited 35 times around the world in the past 30 years. By selecting around 240 artworks, the aim of this exhibition is to transmit the impressive scope of themes and opportunities offered by this collection. Therefore, we have chosen the title Japan, Form and Function. Form and function are 2 key terms that correspond to the collector's fascination for this kind of objects, as well as their intrinsic value. The collector, Jeffrey Montgomery, has always been interested in the functional aspect of the works and in the energy channeled into them by all the people who have used them for centuries. He is also fascinated by the sculptural qualities of the artworks and is attracted by the different forms and shapes that an object can be adorned with. Most of the exhibits on show are meant to be seen from all sides and were used in everyday life. An exquisite example is this tokoname storage jar from the 12th century. This old ceramic is decorated with green glaze and covered with fragments of ash. It has collapsed sides and an irregular shape, which were created in an uncontrollable incident that can happen in a kiln. It is exactly this natural occurrence that makes the object even more unique and adds to the aesthetics of folk art. Moreover, the thick green glaze dripping unevenly on the sides and the bulging fragments of ash which fell spontaneously on the vessel add dynamism to it. The beauty of such functional objects lay in emphasizing qualities such as asymmetry, rusticity, expression of nature, roughness, and spontaneity. Jeffrey Montgomery, whom we have the pleasure of having with us today, is more than a collector. He considers himself a keeper. He feels privileged to own a large array of works that represent an impressive variety of styles, forms, provenances, motives, influences, and uses, all related to Japan, a country which has always fascinated him and which he regularly visited for many decades. There are 2 elements of the culture and its objects that nurtured the deep bond between Montgomery and Japan: the strong ties with nature and the subtle implication of the transience of the world. Montgomery has an intimate relationship with his collection. He periodically rotates the display in his house, depending on the season, his mood, and events in life. Montgomery considers himself a keeper because he knows that most of these objects belonged to and were used by generations of Japanese people before him. And now, thanks to his remarkable and attentive taste, he was able to gather these works and keep them under the same collection, providing a new life as a comprehensive survey of Japanese folk art. Over the past 30 years, the collection has been exhibited in more than 30 museums, such as the V&A in London, the Museum Bellerive in Zurich, the Musée des Arts Asiatiques in Nice, the Japan Society Gallery, and Bar Graduate Center in New York. In addition, the collection has been published in numerous books and catalogs, with essays by noted scholars providing some of the best references for Japanese folk art available in Western languages. And now I would like to talk about an important historical and philosophical background related to Japanese folk art. It is not possible to speak about Japanese folk art without mentioning the Mingei movement born in Japan in the 1920s. The terms Mingei or Minshu-teki Kogei were coined by its founder Yanagi Soetsu and refer to the handmade art or craft of the ordinary people. The Mingei movement was founded at the end of the Taisho period, at the time when Japan was transitioning from a democratic government towards the nationalistic regime introduced in the Showa period. The philosopher and scholar Yanagi stood against the industrialization and modernization of the country based on the Western model. He attempted to bring back the identity of his country through the revitalization of local handmade craftsmanship. Yanagi claimed that Mingei or folk art reflected indigenous and pure Japanese folk production with clear regional differences, typical and unique to Japan. As handmade mass-produced wares, Mingei products responded to the needs of everyday life, yet with high artisanal quality. Yanagi compiled 25 large volumes with essays written by himself on the Mingei theory. He wrote about the type of beauty and aesthetics found in folk art, the many sites of production of Mingei in Japan, the importance of the Korean influence, the lifestyle of Mingei makers, and much more. However, there were also controversial aspects to his theories, such as a strong colonial and nationalistic attitude and the issue of signing an artwork. Within his anti-modernist approach, Yanagi created a new standard of beauty and composed a list of criteria according to which a certain work of art or craft could be considered Mingei. In order to belong to the category of Mingei, objects have to be made by anonymous craftsmen. They are representative of the region in which they are produced. They are mass-produced by hand and made of natural materials, and they are inexpensive at the time of production. Also, Mingei objects are functional in daily life. Yanagi pleaded for a concept of beauty based on anonymity, irregularity, asymmetry, roughness, and deformation. In fact, he claimed that the true beauty remains unaffected, regardless of the presence or absence of a signature or seal, regardless of the issue of rarity, regardless of questions concerning immaculate condition. Some of the main promoters of the Mingei movement were Kawai Kanjiro, Hamada Shoji, Shimaoka Tatsuzo, and the British Bernard Leach. They have spent a long time traveling around Japan, selecting the objects that would fit their newly coined category of folk art, and they were writing books and articles on the topic. They were also ceramic artists who studied the different production techniques and learned about the composition of glazes both in Japan and abroad. Some of them were inspired by Okinawan art, such as Hamada, and others were fascinated by Korean slipware, such as Shimaoka. Even though the collection has been exhibited 34 times before this exhibition, for the Crow Museum, we were able to propose a new concept. It is a geographical exploration of the country from south to north. Most of the galleries are equipped with a map of the country, especially designed to highlight one or more regions of Japan. This geographical approach helps to emphasize important themes, such as the various cross-cultural influences that have impacted each area of the country, from the tropical southern islands to the frigid mountainous north, or the different production techniques based on the habits and needs of people living in different regions. As an example, I would like to mention two typical arts of weaving, one from the Okinawa region in the south of Japan, and one from Tohoku in the northern area of the country. I will start with Okinawa. Okinawa is known for the bashofu textiles, which have been used to make clothes since the 13th century. Bashofu are made of fibers from the Japanese banana plant called basho, which turns into a beautiful light brown, firm and thin cloth. The whole cultivation process, from cutting the tree to producing threads, requires 3 years. Such garments are characterized by smoothness, lightness, and airiness, which make them perfect to be worn in a hot and tropical region. On the other hand, different techniques were employed for textiles made in the Tohoku region, where the climate was much colder and dry. Workers and farmers needed garments to protect them during the long winters, and the materials were restricted to those that were allowed or affordable under feudal regulations. This farmer's jacket was made with a stitching technique consisting of repeatedly padding the hem to turn it into a thick, warm, and durable fabric. Moreover, the intricate, beautiful designs with running stitches in white cotton thread on dark indigo cloth are said to resemble snow on the ground. Alongside the geographical exploration of the country, the exhibition offers many opportunities to learn about a specific theme related to Japan, such as the rich and diverse ceramic production of the Kyushu region, which has been influenced by shapes and designs from China and Korea. Or the section dedicated to Buddhism and Shinto, two religions that have coexisted in Japan for many centuries. Here you will see a number of Buddhist temple guardians, candle stands, an altar cover, as well as 3 pairs of Shinto shrine guardians and much more. There is also a section dedicated to the pine tree. As an evergreen capable of surviving in harsh conditions, the pine tree is a symbol of strength, longevity, and resilience. Pine trees were a popular motif for objects used in everyday life, such as tea kettles, lacquer trays, or futon covers. They appear in many forms, as a regular pine tree in its bonsai version, as pine cones, or even just pine needles. This is only one example, which offers an idea of the origins of such symbols and how they are part of everyday life for the Japanese people. There are several more sub-themes to explore throughout the 7 galleries of the core museum, such as the Okinawan funerary practices, or the 6 ancient kilns, the resist dyeing techniques, and much more. A further way to explore this exhibition is to look for the different materials and techniques employed to create each work of art. Before, I mentioned 2 weaving techniques, one from Okinawa and another one from Tohoku. But visitors can also discover the dyeing techniques for futon covers and other textiles, or learn about the different types of glazes used to decorate a ceramic. For example, the contrasting effect of these 2 vessels, one being a tokoname storage jar with natural ash glaze to the left, and the other one a shodai jar for storing tea leaves with ivory-colored rice straw ash glaze over brownish wood ash glaze. Those were only some suggestions to enjoy the exhibition, but there are also many other ways to explore this show. For example, there are 3 artists on display that were designated living national treasures. In the exhibition, there is also a section dedicated to the collector, Jeffrey Montgomery, where the visitors can learn about his life and career. There are also a number of tales that are told in the exhibition, such as the Chinese tale, The 3 Lotters at Tiger Creek, which was a popular story in Japan and is the subject of the Buddhist altar in the Okinawan room. Or the striking anecdote of Daruma, the patriarch of Zen Buddhism, explaining the reason why he cut out his own eyelids. Another interesting story relates to a rare example of a cotton cape inspired by a Portuguese garment exhibited in Gallery 4. This exhibition also includes a number of objects that were used during specific festivals or were given at special occasions, such as the Empress doll displayed during the Girls' Day on March 3rd, or a huge banner hanging in an open space during the Boys' Day on May 5th. There are also representations of auspicious symbols, such as noshi, which you can see on this futon cover to the right. Noshi represents a bundle of abalone strips tied with paper and has the symbolic meaning of long life and good relationships. In this case, the image of a bundle of abalone on a futon cover would be a very appropriate wedding gift. I hope that with this presentation I was able to inspire you to visit this exhibition and consider each gallery a unique, special show. I also wish you a wonderful exploration of Japan through the art of its people, and I thank you for your attention. And now I pass on the word to David to start our conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Luigi. We certainly are inspired, and hopefully everybody will get out to Dallas to see this wonderful exhibit. And I should have mentioned at the very beginning that Jeffrey and Luigi are in Jeffrey's home in Lugano. So they're coming to us live, and they have a beautiful mizuya in back of them there, but we won't get into that right now. Anyway, why don't we kick off the questions? Jeffrey, how did this all get started? What was the very first Mingei item that you acquired, and do you still have that in your collection?
I have no idea what the first one was. It depends upon the category, and I really don't recall that too much either. I started out as a young chap. I started out with lacquer and little small animal sculpture, bronze sculptures, which I gave away some months or a few years later when I started thinking and seeing these objects that were used. I was fascinated by what the people were doing, which was very new for me. And my whole life, I've always sort of sat and wondered and thought of what I was doing and why I was doing it, and why I was so enhanced by the Japanese and what they were doing, because I, as a person, have never been part of or never wanted to be a part of a group, but I like individuals and separate things to look and study at. But with Mingei, it all just, I didn't think of it as the Mingei. I just thought of these objects that I saw that I would always ask questions, whether it be to later on the curators. Don't forget that I was doing all of this in a very different world too, because the dealers that I knew are no longer there, or very few are left, and also the curators that I met over the years. So I was always listening to people, even those that I didn't particularly care about. But I was always listening to what they said. And then the objects, for the most part, at the end, it was my decision. Of course, there were things that perhaps I should have included that I didn't, but I certainly had more than my fair share. I've been very, very fortunate in life to be able to move since I was 18. I did go back to London to finish my studies, and then I just started traveling and purchasing, also in Europe, also particularly on the East Coast, in the stateside. I was able to find things that came over right after the Americans forced open the border into Japan. And there was a period when I found many things that people no longer wanted, and also from dealers. And then, of course, with my many trips to France and England and Belgium and Germany, and also, of course, the multiple trips that I was doing to Japan, I always found something which for me was a treasure, but I never thought of I never looked for any specific thing. It was only the gathering of all of these years that these things came together. I don't know how it all happened, but it seemed to have just sort of melded together and rounded out by itself. And at the beginning of it all, after my few exhibits that I had in New York, I had people say to me, well, you have, it seems, one of the most important exhibits or collections of Japanese folk art outside of Japan. And my answer at that time was always, well, it's the only one, so it has to be perhaps the best or the worst, doesn't it? And it all sort of moved ahead, and I was very relaxed. I've always been very relaxed in what I was doing, and I'm not by nature competitive at all. I always felt that there was enough. I also have a few stories which I won't go into about pieces which I got, but I didn't get. But suddenly, after 2 or 3 years, they all came around and I got them at the end of the day. Anyway, but I never looked at things in that way. It just sort of fell into place, and the collection built itself up as that, David. I don't know how. I'm quite amazed even today at 86 years old how I happened to do it. But it's always nice to know that you've done a good job, isn't it?
It is, it is. Well, Jeffrey, now that you have that collection, Luigi mentioned all the different types of media that it comprises. And so among textiles, metalwork, ceramics, do you have a favorite? And if so, why?
Well, I have a tendency to look at different areas of a collection. And I bring certain pieces in. I don't have a museum type of house. I don't have special lighting. I just have things where I see them because nobody that comes there is particularly interested in what I've been doing anyway, you know. So if I'm looking at ceramics, I will bring out ceramics from different areas and I will study them. COVID and lockdown gave me a great opportunity to review several things that I hadn't done in some years. But I look at things as they are, and so I become interested in that particular section of things from the collection. And as far as what I have in the flat, I just exchange things and for not any particular reason whatsoever, just things that appealed to me personally at that particular moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have
Um,
any favorites now.
okay. Maybe this is a question for the two of you. There have in fact been other Mingei exhibits in the West in the 70s, 80s, 90s at different institutions, whether the Seattle Art Museum or the Brooklyn Museum or at the K-Bar Lee. But I think it's probably safe to say that given the number of exhibitions of the Montgomery Collection that have taken place in all the publications, that in many ways you've done more to make Mingei known in the West than any one institution. But what would your thoughts be about that observation?
Well, when you ask me that, I've got to say that to me it has a very strong cultural identity, which is very important to me. And I'm hopefully that by the end of my life, I will find a place for it. It's an excellent study collection also, not
Mm-hmm.
only something to be seen. And I hope that culturally it goes where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Luigi, a question for you. This is a vast and wonderful collection. So how in the world did you go through it and come up with 200 some odd items out of the more than 1,000? It's less than 20% of the collection. So that must have been quite a venture. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, so I would say that we first started considering the spaces of the Crow Museum because one of the main advantages of this museum is that it has very large galleries with a very tall ceiling or with a very wide wall. And that's why we decided, for example, to show some banners that have never been shown before from the Montgomery Collection because there was a space to showcase them at the Crow Museum. And also, after deciding the main concept, which is this geographical exploration of Japan, we wanted to have a very big variety and diversity of objects and artworks that would cover most regions of Japan. Actually, Jeffrey also has some Ainu textiles from Hokkaido, but because of space limitations, we couldn't cover that region. So we decided not to include more than 3 or 4 examples from the same kiln, for example, or from the same style, design. And that's how we started looking at objects that would cover all types of materials, designs, and regions. Of course, we had to omit some categories. For example, there are no Otsue in the exhibition, and there is only one Japanese mask, while Jeffrey has a lot of masks. But those are for sure themes that can be studied and displayed in further exhibitions. And so, yes, we also wanted to focus on some important themes. For example, all of the Mingei movement ceramics are at the Crow right now. And we wanted to include also the recent acquisitions by Jeffrey, a few Mingei pieces. So those are also new things. And yes, so this is how we went through that decisional process.
Okay, that's great. Well, Luigi, during your introductory remarks, you mentioned the exhibit at the Bard in New York that took place a few years ago that was just ceramics. So I was wondering, have there been any other exhibits that feature just one aspect of the Montgomery collection, or was that it?
So yes, there have been exhibition only about textiles. For example, an exhibition about daikoku and ebisu, which are wooden figurine sculptures. So yeah, that's not the only one. And also in terms of catalogs, there are very interesting catalogs that are about only one type of medium. And there are catalogs in all kinds of languages. So this collection has been studied as a comprehensive Mingei collection, as well as just collection of textiles or wooden sculptures or ceramics. So yeah, there have been different ways that people looked at it.
Great.
I'm
great.
doomed.
I guess you are, Jeffrey. There's no two ways about it. Jeffrey, you had mentioned a little earlier that some of the dealers that you worked with are no longer around, and I have to note that earlier this year, Morita-san closed his shop in Tokyo, and so there is a changing of the guard taking place. So do you feel that there's a new generation of dealers coming along who might be able to assist the future Jeffrey Montgomerys, or what do you see happening in the field of?
I don't unfortunately see anything happening. It's not because nothing is happening. I think it's because I'm from a lost generation, from a generation which has had its time, and I see that it can no longer be continued. I was very fortunate to have known wonderful people. I have always been very much upheld in what I was doing. And I always seemed, for the most part, to attract people that believed in what I was doing and were very generous with me, not necessarily in the acquisitions, but in helping me get through certain moments of, well, what is this about? What is that about? What do you think about this? And the decisions at the end I always made myself, because I was very fortunate. It was just a time when I didn't have many other responsibilities in life. And my main passion, I mean, I've been very fortunate to have lived more than half my life with passion and not having any interruptions whatsoever by outside sources, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are people that you like and you don't like, and I've always been in a position where I could just disassociate with anyone I didn't like. So it all went very
That's wonderful.
smoothly. Yes, I've been very fortunate. I'm a very fortunate man.
Well, I think I know the answer to this question based on a couple of things you've said already, but there are many collectors who have a curator or somebody like that who is their close advisor all the way through. And I get the impression that has not been your model in collecting, that you rely more on yourself than on outside opinions. But could you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, well, I've never thought about any particular curator as being the one curator for the collection, but usually curators are always suggested to me. Luigi happens to be at my side because I met Luigi several years ago, who is the son of the director of the Ligonetto Museum, and he's brilliant. He's very modest. He's a young chap that speaks 7 languages, reads and writes them. and he's not much less than a genius if he is one at all. And he has over the years been able to study the collection. He fell in love with the collection. And you know, if you're in love with what you're doing and someone else shares that love, it's a love affair. So I said to Luigi, I want you to curate this exhibit. And that was one of the conditions that I said to the museum, which they didn't. Amy Hoffland, who's the director of the Crow Museum, was always very generous and gave me exactly what I asked for. I don't ask for very much, and I ask for it very low tone. As long as I don't have to suffer humiliation or attitude, I don't do well under either one of those, and I back away immediately. Yes, you know, I've had experience. For instance, when I had my exhibit, Five Tastes in New York when I shared the exhibit, or they shared the other collectors, private collectors, as well as the Met was there. And they wanted to put one of my items, a very wonderful 18th century Katakuchi red lacquer, an absolutely magnificent piece, if I may say so myself. They wanted to put it on the cover, and the collector said, well, if you put the Montgomery piece on the collection, I back out. Well,
goodness. Wow.
you know, these are things that I don't get into that. I said, don't put my piece on, put whatever piece you want. I really don't care. I go where I need to go as long as I don't have anything to do with anyone that assumes that attitude, which I didn't. So this didn't happen very often either, you know, but it's been a wonderful sailing period. So I really can't complain about much, although I'd like to. But you know, when you complain, no one listens to you anyway. So why bother?
Oh, but those are the most fascinating stories, aren't they? And Luigi, I hope you won't let all this go to your head. Oh my goodness. But here's another question for you two gentlemen. You know, I can't help noticing, given my interest in Mingei, that typically there's not a lot out on permanent display in major museums around the world. You know, at the V&A in London, there is a little Mingei section in what appears to be a permanent exhibit. But otherwise, things sort of come out every now and then. You might see a couple of pieces of seto, or there might be a textile. But it's not something that it seems curators at major museums feel they have to have out at all times. Why do you think that is?
So I don't personally, just very quickly, I don't really think that it was particularly taken into consideration. And it certainly was not until quite recently by the Japanese themselves, who have understood that of its value. I think that what the Western world has done for my exhibits anyway, and which is quite wonderful, is that in the Western world they've understood what lighting is. The Mingei Kahn keeps the ceramic on the ground, which is used for water, and it's not lit up. You don't know what it's all about. And you think, oh, well, there's a pot. What did they put in that? You know? But here, that's why when my wife said to me once, well, don't you think that the collection should finish in Japan? And I said, oh, of course not. I never thought about it, but it needs to finish in the Western world, because it's the Western world that gives it another aspect or other aspects of beauty that the Japanese have not taken yet, or if they ever will, into consideration, which is not a fault. It's just, you know, the way it is. And I find all of this very interesting and intriguing. Luigi.
I think that Mingei is a difficult topic to relate with for the people in the West. I don't think that's a problem in Japan. They keep having exhibitions about ceramists, weavers, textile makers, and even now there is an exhibition about Sodeisha in Kyoto, an exhibition about Mingei in Osaka. But I think in the West it's difficult to transmit and to translate what Mingei is into an exhibition for a museum, especially thinking that these objects were used and have a highly functional component, which usually is not easy to add to an art museum in the West. And also people are usually more used to see Japanese prints, Japanese Buddhist art, paintings, scrolls, and seeing set of plates or sake bottles just all of a sudden is not really appealing for a Western audience still nowadays. But I think that the Montgomery collection has really helped into expanding the knowledge with all these exhibitions and catalogs. And also I think that people are having a higher sensitivity compared to handmade objects nowadays. And also with these big movements related to ecology, and people are stepping back from the industrially produced, mass-produced wares by machinery, and they start looking at ceramic wares or textiles. Even in Zurich, here in Switzerland, a community of ceramists is expanding, and they're having more and more events. So I think that people start to look back at these handmade objects. So
I would like to add something very interesting which happened to me. I've had also a year just before I went to Dallas in the local Lugano Museum, and I would go in when someone would ask me to speak, and people had joy because most of them had never known the collector or never seen a collector, and there were many museum goers. And there were several occasions when people came to me afterwards and said, I don't know what it was that I saw, but it was so inspiring, and I can't thank you enough for your explanation and for what life has given you through this collection. It's absolutely wonderful. It was so heart-filling for me. This little old lady from Zurich said to me, I've been on my pension now for 15 years, and once a month I take a train to another Swiss city and go to a museum. And I've come back to see your collection 2 times to buy 3 catalogs to bring back to Zurich for my friends. Or I also had, and then I won't go on anymore, this lovely woman that came up to me. She was in her early 40s and said, I'm from Sao Paulo. I've been living here for some time. I love Japan. There's a large Japanese community in Sao Paulo. They don't know anything about Japan, however. And she said, your collection is so inspiring for me. And she had tears in her eyes. Well, of course, I'm looking at her because you don't see people's eyes anymore. They're all on their iPhones, you know. So most people are looking downward, not at you. So my eyes filled with tears, and I didn't know what to say. And I've always known something to say to most everyone. And so the only thing, she finished this, and I said, may I give you a hug? And so we just hugged each other, and she went away smiling and happy. But yes, I think that what the Montgomery collection brings, and I don't want to sound stuck up about this, but what it brings is a bit of a pattern of life as other people have lived it. And they don't need to know much about what's going on, but it's a feeling of the totality of this, of what I'm able to show them at any one exhibition, which has turned out to be inspiring. And this is inspiring for me. And I've had so many compliments, and I've got to tell you that the Swiss aren't the most complimentary people in the world, but I have had so many compliments. So it's just a lovely, it's just been a lovely trip, you know.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad that you were sharing those stories with us, because those really add a different dimension to the whole notion of Mingei and its importance. But we have some questions from the audience, and so let me ask those. I have lots more that I could ask. But is there a catalog to the exhibit? Someone was wondering.
There is no catalog to the exhibit. There was no time to do it because there was so much to do, and the spaces had to be opened up. It's the first time that the Crow Museum, since its existence of only a few years actually, but since it's existing, that they had to knock down walls and build, which Luigi was also responsible for. I think he got rid of a lot of his frustrations, you know, knocking walls down and building new ones. But anyway, there was a lot of work to be done. And this is the first exhibit I've had without a catalog. But they said to me, well, you know, our intention is, whether it ever happens, I don't know. I have no commitments, is to do 2 volumes of the entire collection. So we'll see. They asked me if they could have it all to do some exchanges, because I cannot become very actively involved anymore. You know, I get tired very quickly and lose patience more quickly than I ever did before. So I have to have people that really know what they're doing and going to take care of it. And since they're doing a good job, it's fine. And you know, whatever happens, happens. I think I'm going on the right road.
Oh, excellent. So here's a great question. Jeffrey, is your collection complete? Do you consider it to be complete at this point?
I don't think any collection is complete. I think it's all very individual. There's always something. I don't think I was told. I can even mention my very dear friends, 2 of the most wonderful dealers I've ever dealt with from Kagedo, Jeff Klein and Bill Knospe from Kagedo. They told me about 20 years ago that it would take them almost 20 years to build a collection like the Montgomery Collection. And in the last 10 years, they said to me it can never be done because the works are not out there anymore. So I can add things, which occasionally I do. You know what it's like, David. You're a collector. You know, sometimes I would say to myself, well, you know, why do it? Why do it? But you always find that one piece that you say, oh, well, that's got to go into that space, you know. And so not looking at things, but not looking for things. I don't look for anything anymore. But there are very, very special things that find their way to me.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
I'm not buying very much anymore, but I am adding an occasional piece.
Mm-hmm.
In all areas, particularly this selection that Luigi made. It's very, very interesting. The ceramic collection at the Crow. It's very vast,
Mm-hmm.
and I find it very, very inspiring, even for me, what he has done.
Like, can't wait to see it. I haven't been down there yet, but
well, I hope you can have a chance to get to that. It's only 3-hour flight.
Right, I know. I looked. So
and
here's
if you behave yourself, no one will shoot you.
Oh, that's well, thank you. Thank you for that. You know, we'll let all of our members of JASA know. I'm sure that will encourage them. I believe I know the answer to this question, but Jeffrey, did you ever meet Yanagi Soetsu?
No, I never met him. I never met him. I met Munakata, and as a matter of fact, he did a couple designs for me, which are on display. And no, I didn't. It was just a bit before my time, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And here's a question, something that I was wondering about too. I was looking at the catalogs from your different exhibits before.
Shimako, I knew quite well. Shimoka.
Okay.
I knew. I visited him quite frequently.
Okay, wonderful. So one of our viewers today noticed that for the Japan Society exhibit in 1992, it indicated that the collector was anonymous. And so our viewers asking, why did you want to be anonymous at that particular point?
Okay, the first, you know, it was a different moment in my life. I had never exhibited. I never aspired to be a collector. And it was not, well, let me just say this. The first 30 exhibits were done anonymously. Why were they done anonymously? Not because I don't care about Montgomery. I don't need my name on a wall, Montgomery Collection, because when you're dead, no one's going to remember who David Kahn was anyway. They're only going to, you know, after a few, you know, our lives, we're kept alive as long as people are around who care about us. And when those other people are gone after we have already been gone, no one remembers who you were anyway. So I don't have any illusions about that. Basically, as I mentioned just a moment ago, I'm interested in the collection culturally because this is what I didn't start out that way. I started out as passion and love, which I've been able to maintain all of these years. And then, of course, there was the growth. There was the emotional growth. There was the educational growth about what I was doing. And then I realized after a time that what I was doing had a certain importance. Well, it has a certain importance, particularly to me, but culturally, it has proven to be something which people love and adore. And what's better in life than to bring joy to someone's life, an unexpected joy, particularly? And this is what stimulates me. And then afterwards, I had the director, who's no longer around, of a very important American university, said to me after, when he saw the collection in New York, which was anonymous, he said, if you continue doing this, you're going to have to give it a name, because people are going to want to know what they've seen should they ever go again to see an anonymous collection. But if you continue, you've got to give it a name. And that was so simple, I mean, my mind was not working. Well, it never worked very anything but simply anyway. But it was just such a simple solution. And I said, well, that's absolutely true, isn't it? Well, I guess I'll have to call it Montgomery. That's my last name. So it became the Montgomery Collection. But the first three, yes, were anonymous, not for any particular reason, only because I didn't care about myself being known at that time.
Mm-hmm. So I think you've sort of answered this next question, but you might have a little different spin. How long was it before you realized you were a collector of Mingei and that you had an eye for it?
A very good question. I don't think anyone has ever asked me about. I don't quite know what kind of. I'd have to give that consideration, because I've never thought of myself as a collector, but as the collection grew, I've always thought of myself as the keeper, not the collector. The keeper of building something which it seems that has an importance and I don't know. I still don't think of myself as the collector. I think of myself as the keeper of something, maybe minor, I don't know, but whatever it is, I love it. And I feel that it's a culture which should be shared with the world, because every culture, regardless of the country it comes from, if it's worthwhile, it belongs to the world, isn't it?
Yes, this is true. Let me ask you both something. There are different places to see Mingei in Japan other than the Mingei Kahn. So if people who want to visit Japan are interested in seeing Mingei over there, do you have recommendations for them? Would it be the homes of Kauai and Hamada, or the Mingei Kahn in smaller cities, Tottori and Kurashiki and those sorts of places? Or
Karachi,
what?
of course, the Karachi Museum is. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
well, for me, I don't think that people know enough about Mingei to say I'm going to go see Mingei in Japan. I really don't think that happens.
We're trying to inspire them, Jeffrey.
Well,
My suggestion would be to go straight to those ceramic or textile centers, because actually those Japanese craftsmen working there are very open and happy when they see especially a foreigner trying to understand what they're doing. That's what I've been doing the past three or four trips to Japan. I visited, for example, Tokoname or Shigaraki or Kushiro, Nokonoshima, and I wanted to personally meet the ceramists that produce ceramics with by hand and use the old anagama or noborigama and still make glazes themselves. So and that's probably what Yanagi did at the time when he started thinking of Mingei. And so nowadays it's still quite active, even though it's slowly decreasing this handmade production, because there are not many young people, Japanese people, interested in continuing the legacy. So I would suggest starting with, for example, just going to Tokoname, one of the 6 ancient kilns, or go to Tokushima, for example, where they still make the indigo dyeing, the aizome. They're still producing the pigments there from their cultivation. And also, as I mentioned before, Japan is very sensitive to the topic of craftsmanship. There are many exhibitions on textile makers, on ceramicists, and even the Mingei exhibition at the Nakanoshima Museum in Osaka or the Sodeisha exhibition in Kyoto. There are many exhibitions currently ongoing in Japan that deal with Japanese crafts, arts
For
and crafts.
people that don't know Japan, it's important to go to an agency that specializes. That's a good thing for you to start doing, David. You've got to start bringing people over to Japan that are interested in ceramics and textiles and this and that. And so create a whole new generation.
Okay, I'll have a mission.
Yeah.
Here's another question. Jeffrey, did you ever meet Martha Longenecker, the founder of the...
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Under unfortunate circumstances, because she was not at the San Diego Museum was not up. She was in La Jolla at that time,
Right.
and there was a South American exhibit going on. And that particular day that I arrived, and I didn't quite know how to get there, and it took forever to drive there. I was driving down from a friend's house in Santa Barbara. I didn't know what it was going to take to get to La Jolla, and that was many moons ago. My goodness, I wouldn't recommend that. Well, today I guess it's impossible to get by automobile. But anyway, there was a piece which was stolen from the museum, but so she was not very happy about that. I can understand. But yes, and she took me to her home, and we spoke for hours and hours, and we had lunch together. Then we had an early dinner together. And then she gave me a very nice pot,
Oh,
which I
that's
thought was
wonderful.
very good. But I never had any any other dealings with her after that. No.
Right. Yeah,
Very
she
interesting.
she was,
quite
and
a
she studied with Hamada at
yes,
one
yes,
point.
yes,
I've seen
yes.
photographs
I
of her
know.
there in his workshop, which was rather remarkable. Well, let's see. I guess we're getting to the end of our questions here, but is there anything else that Jeffrey, you would like to share with us about either this exhibit or your long journey now in collecting Mingei over the decades?
Well, I think I've just about said it, haven't I?
Well, you've really shared some wonderful stories with us, and
It's
we
my
really
pleasure.
it's very much
It's my
appreciated.
pleasure. I hope I've
And
provoked a bit of enthusiasm
oh,
with what I've people out there.
I think you have. And is there some possibility that you'll be visiting the exhibit in Dallas in the future, so people might actually meet you there?
Well, that would be lovely because I will certainly go next year.
Okay.
I will be there for the symposium, most definitely. Last trip there, I stayed for a month actually at the opening,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, good.
it was very very nice.
And you didn't get shot.
I didn't know I behaved myself.
Oh, good. Well, I
Yes,
would expect nothing less of you.
I was,
But
uh, yes,
still, you
yes.
never know.
People, you never know today, do you?
Right. Well, listen, we're going to end on that happy note, but this has been a joy to chat with Jeffrey Montgomery and Luigi Zeni, and we hope that everybody will get to Dallas to see this wonderful exhibit and maybe even meet Jeffrey. You never know.
You
And
never
so
know. Well,
you never.
come next October, and we'll all have lunch together.
Okay, well, we will do that. So, Helen Goldenberg, if there's nothing else that you would like to say, I guess we're all set. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, David, for moderating this.